At the grand estate on a crisp autumn afternoon, the wedding of Amara and Eric unfolded as if lifted from a dream. The sprawling garden was transformed into a wonderland of cascading florals, twinkling fairy lights, and artfully arranged tables draped in soft linens. Every detail, each petal of the roses, every gentle note from the string quartet, seemed designed to celebrate love in its purest form.
Amara, the radiant bride, stotterte the threshold of a new life.
Her ivory gown, embroidered delicately with silver threads, swirled around her as she moved with quiet grace. Her eyes sparkled with both anticipation and a hint of vulnerability, while her smile held the promise of endless possibilities. At her side, Eric, her devoted groom, exuded warmth and confidence. His steady gaze and gentle reassurances spoke of a lifetime of shared dreams and unspoken understanding. Together, they embodied a perfect union, a meeting of kindred souls destined to walk life's path together. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, murmurs began to ripple through the gathered crowd. Amid the laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses, hushed voices speculated about an unusual presence at the fringe of the celebration. At first, the sight was barely noticeable, a solitary figure in worn, tattered clothes, moving with an unhurried, almost haunted gait. But as the figure drew nearer, the tension in the air thickened. Eyes that had been filled with joy now narrowed in suspicion, and the celebratory atmosphere took on an undercurrent of unease. The stranger, his face partly obscured by the brim of a battered hat, stepped boldly into the center of the meticulously arranged space. His clothes, patched and faded, contrasted sharply with the crisp elegance surrounding him. In that instant, the room's energy shifted. The chorus of laughter was replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Security personnel exchanged wary glances and began to converge, their footsteps measured and voices low as they approached. Before anyone could intercept him, the man reached out with surprising resolve and seized the unattended microphone near the entrance. In doing so, he not only broke the silence but also shattered the carefully maintained illusion of perfection. From his cracked lips emerged a melody, a haunting, soulful tune that wove itself into the very fabric of the afternoon. The notes, tender yet laced with profound sorrow, floated through the air, capturing the attention of every guest. For a moment, it was as if time itself paused, the beauty of the wedding now interlaced with the bittersweet strains of a lost past. Amara, standing at the altar with a bouquet clutched to her chest, felt an unexpected chill run down her spine as the melody reached her ears. Her heart, already aflutter with the joy and nerves of the day, stuttered in dissonance with the haunting tune. And then, in a voice laden with a mixture of disbelief and longing, she cried out, "Daddy." The word reverberated across the hushed garden, a single syllable that shattered the delicate veneer of celebration and left every onlooker grappling with a sudden, inexplicable sense of loss. Faces around the garden contorted with shock, confusion, and even a touch of empathy as the implications of her cry rippled through the crowd. Who was this broken man, daring to intrude upon such a sacred moment? What connection did he share with Amara? A connection so deep that it could transform a day of joy into a haunting echo of the past. In that instant, the wedding was no longer just a ceremony of new beginnings. It had become the stage for an unforeseen and deeply personal drama. The unexpected intrusion, the ragged figure with a voice that trembled between agony and beauty, had introduced a mystery that no one present could ignore. The contrast between the pristine setting and the man's disheveled appearance was jarring, yet the melody he sang hinted at a story rich with heartache and history. In that moment, every carefully planned detail, every joyful promise, was overshadowed by the profound questions his presence raised. As the final note of his lament faded into the heavy silence, a single truth began to emerge. The past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing at the most inopportune and transformative moments. The man's presence had cast a long shadow over the celebration, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and the palpable promise that the events of this day would change the lives of everyone present forever. Years earlier, in a modest sunlit apartment on the edge of a bustling city, James cradled his 6-year-old daughter Amara in a tender embrace. Their humble home, filled with the aroma of fresh bread and the soft hum of a well-loved guitar, was a sanctuary where music was not merely an art, but the very pulse of their lives. James's fingers, calloused yet gentle, danced over the strings as he strummed a lullaby he had composed with love and longing. Every note was a promise, a whisper of security in a world that often seemed too harsh for tender hearts. In that small haven, music was their language. It was in the way James's voice, warm and comforting, recited the lyrics that wove the story of their lives. Amara's eyes would light up with wonder as she listened, her small hands clapping in delight. The lullaby was more than a song. It was the tether that bound them together, a melody that filled their modest apartment with hope, even on the coldest nights.
James dreamed of a future where music could transform lives.
By day, he taught children the art of playing the guitar at the local community center, nurturing talent with patience and care. Every strum was an invitation to dream, every chord a doorway to a brighter tomorrow. Though money was often scarce and life's challenges many, his passion for music, and for Amara, remained an unwavering beacon in the darkness. Evenings were spent in quiet reflection, the soft glow of a single lamp casting gentle shadows across the worn wooden floors. James would sit with Amara in his lap, his voice low and soothing as he sang the lullaby that had become their shared secret. In those moments, the world outside faded away. The lullaby, filled with both melancholy and a tender optimism, carried with it unspoken promises of a future where the scars of today would heal with the magic of tomorrow. Yet, beneath the warmth of those harmonious evenings lay the unspoken acknowledgement of life's uncertainties. James, ever the dreamer, knew that time was fleeting. Each note he played was a defiant act against the inevitable passage of days that might one day separate him from his beloved daughter. He sang with a fervor born of both love and desperation, a hope that the beauty of the melody would, somehow, make every moment last forever. As the seasons turned, the bond between father and daughter deepened, a quiet symphony of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and dreams spun from the very fabric of music. Neighbors would often pause to listen to the gentle strains drifting from their modest home, a reminder that even in the smallest of spaces, the human spirit could flourish through the art of song. In the small corners of that apartment, where every worn cushion and faded photograph told a story of resilience, James's lullaby became a ritual, a nightly reminder that, despite the harshness of the world outside, love and music could create a haven of solace. It was a melody that spoke not only of joy but also of the bittersweet nature of life, a reminder that even the most beautiful symphonies were born of both light and shadow. The lullaby, tender and soulful, was their unspoken tether. It was a constant in a world rife with change, a hymn to the enduring power of love. In every note there was a promise, that no matter what trials lay ahead, the bond between them would remain unbroken, echoing through the corridors of time like a cherished refrain. As the gentle night deepened and the city outside fell silent, the soft strains of the lullaby would mingle with the whispers of dreams. In that sacred space between reality and aspiration, father and daughter existed in a timeless embrace, a world where every chord held the hope of tomorrow, and every note was a celebration of the unyielding power of love. On a rain-drenched night, when the streets shimmered with reflections of neon and despair, James kissed Amara goodbye at their modest doorstep. The chill in the air was matched only by the uncertainty in his eyes. That evening, he had promised to attend a charity concert, a rare chance to share his music with a wider audience, to inspire hope in others even as his own heart ached with unspoken worries. With a final embrace and whispered assurances of return, he stepped into the downpour, the memory of Amara's bright smile warming him against the relentless cold. Driving along slick, rain-soaked roads, James's thoughts drifted back to the lullabies sung in their small apartment. The familiar melody played in his mind, a gentle refrain that had sustained him through long, lonely nights. Outside, the world blurred into streaks of light and shadow, each passing moment underscoring the fragile beauty of life. The comforting hum of the engine mixed with the patter of rain against the windshield, creating a rhythm that was both soothing and ominous. In a heartbeat, the tranquil night was shattered. Out of nowhere, blinding headlights appeared, their glare slicing through the darkness like a blade. The sound of screeching tires and the gut-wrenching scream of metal colliding with metal filled the air, a violent symphony of chaos that obliterated the fragile peace James had known moments before. In an instant, everything changed. The comforting cadence of his life was replaced by a cacophony of terror and confusion. As the impact threw his car violently off course, time seemed to slow. Amid the tumult, fragments of the lullaby, those tender notes that had been the soundtrack of his life, echoed faintly in his mind. With a final desperate thought of Amara, the world faded into darkness. In that singular moment of impact, James's life was irreversibly altered, the promise of tomorrow obliterated in a flash of uncontrollable fate. When the chaos subsided, silence fell over the wreckage. Emergency lights painted the ruined landscape with harsh, intermittent bursts of color. James lay unconscious among twisted metal and shattered glass, his body battered and his spirit suspended in a void of confusion. Unaware of the magnitude of the tragedy, he was trapped in a limbo where the lullaby's faint strains clung to the edges of his consciousness. In those final moments before unconsciousness claimed him, a single fragile note resonated, a memory of love that had defined his every heartbeat. The aftermath was a blur of flashing ambulance lights, hurried voices, and sterile hospital corridors. When James eventually awoke, it was not to the comforting lullabies of his home, but to a stark, clinical reality. Pain seared through his body, and a deep, disorienting emptiness crept into his mind. In the months that followed, he would learn that the accident had robbed him of more than just physical strength. It had stolen his memories, leaving behind only the faint echo of that cherished melody. In the wake of the crash, everything James once held dear was reduced to fragments: the laughter of his daughter, the warmth of his embrace, and the promise of a future built on shared dreams. The accident had not only erased the past, but also severed the invisible thread that had bound him to the life he knew. Yet, somewhere deep within, the lullaby persisted, a ghostly reminder of the love that had once illuminated his world. Each day after the accident was a struggle against a profound sense of loss. The world, once filled with the vibrant notes of his music, had become a silent void. And yet, even as he fought to reclaim his identity from the wreckage of that fateful night, the soft strains of the lullaby lingered, a stubborn spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Unbeknownst to him, this fragile melody would eventually lead him on a winding path back toward the one person he had lost, his beloved daughter Amara. When James finally emerged from the depths of his coma, he found himself in a stark, white hospital room, a place where time seemed both suspended and mercilessly relentless. The once familiar warmth of home had been replaced by the antiseptic chill of sterile corridors and the constant beeping of monitors. Every breath was a reminder of his shattered body, and every painful movement echoed with the weight of memories he could no longer grasp. The doctors spoke in measured tones about the severity of his injuries, and though their words attempted to offer hope, a gnawing uncertainty settled within him. There was an overwhelming void where his identity should have been, a blank space where the vibrant tapestry of his past had once thrived. Names, faces, and memories that had defined his existence were now nothing more than fleeting fragments, slipping through his fingers like wisps of smoke. In his mind, the only constant was that ethereal melody, the lullaby that whispered of love and loss, echoing faintly at the edges of his consciousness. Discharged with no identification and little more than the soft strain of a forgotten song to guide him, James stepped out into a world that had moved on without him. The once familiar streets were alien and unforgiving. Without a name, without the security of memories, he was forced to reinvent himself in a reality that felt both harsh and disjointed. Every step on the cold pavement was a painful reminder of what had been lost, and of the identity that had been erased in that fateful accident. Drifting through unfamiliar neighborhoods, James became a shadow of the man he once was. The fragments of his former life were scattered like pieces of a broken mirror, reflecting only a disjointed image of a past filled with music, love, and promise. In the silence of long, lonely nights, the lullaby emerged again, a soft, insistent refrain that offered neither answers nor solace, only the aching reminder of a love that had been stripped away. As days turned into weeks, the man without a name began to disappear into the margins of society. Homelessness was not a choice but a forced circumstance, a reality in which his identity was further diluted by the anonymity of the streets. Yet, despite the isolation and despair, the haunting melody never left him. It was as if the song was the only remnant of who he once was, a fragile lifeline connecting him to a past that was slipping further away with each passing moment. In the quiet hours of early morning, beneath a tattered blanket in a forgotten corner of the city, James would often close his eyes and try to summon the warmth of a memory, a glimpse of the smile that once lit up his daughter's face, or the gentle caress of her small hand in his. But all that remained was the soft echo of the lullaby, a sound that filled the void with bittersweet fragments of hope. It was a melody that promised a reunion, even as the present threatened to engulf him in darkness. Without a name, without the guiding light of his memories, James embarked on a lonely journey through a world that had long since forgotten him. And yet, amid the overwhelming solitude, the lullaby persisted, a tender refrain that whispered of a connection yet unbroken, of a love that defied even the most merciless strokes of fate. In that fragile, persistent melody lay the first seeds of a journey back, a path toward reclaiming not only his identity but the very heart of the life that had been stolen from him. The city's underbelly was a harsh landscape for a man stripped of everything familiar. James, now a nameless wanderer, found himself navigating dimly lit streets and abandoned lots with a quiet determination born of desperation. Each day was a struggle for survival, a daily contest against hunger, the cold bite of winter, and the indifferent stares of passers-by who saw only a broken man, not the soul that still carried the weight of a cherished melody. As twilight descended, the city's neon glow provided little comfort to those forced to live in its forgotten corners. James would settle on a battered bench in a quiet park, his guitar his only companion in a world that had cast him aside. With fingers numb from both cold and loss, he would gently strum the worn instrument, coaxing out the soft strains of the lullaby that had once been his life's anthem. Each note was a plea for remembrance, a silent invocation for help from a past that had been all but erased. The coins that clinked into his battered cup were meager, but to James, they represented something far greater than mere currency. They were a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting him to a world where he might still find hope, however elusive. Every face that passed by carried its own story of hardship, yet few stopped long enough to hear the story woven into the melody he played. In the half-light of the evening, as the lullaby flowed from his trembling hands, there was a transient beauty in his struggle, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, the human spirit clings fiercely to memories of love. Yet survival was more than just the physical act of enduring hunger and cold. It was an emotional battle fought silently in the dark hours before dawn. Each night, as James closed his eyes beneath a threadbare blanket, the lullaby would echo in his mind, a bittersweet reminder of a world filled with love, warmth, and possibility. It was this very melody that, even in the face of overwhelming loss, kept him going. Though his memories were fractured and his identity uncertain, the song remained, a steadfast beacon amid the chaos of his shattered life. Over time, the streets became both his refuge and his adversary. In the flickering shadows cast by streetlights, James would sometimes catch fleeting glances of himself in a darkened window, a gaunt figure whose eyes still held a trace of the passion that once defined him. These rare moments of reflection stirred something deep within, a faint hope that perhaps the lullaby was not merely an echo of the past, but a promise of redemption yet to come. In the labyrinthine alleys and silent corners of the city, where time seemed to stand still, James found solace in the simple act of playing his guitar. Each chord was a small act of defiance against the relentless tide of hardship, a testament to the enduring power of music, even when life had seemingly stripped away every reason to sing. And as the night deepened and the world around him slipped into silence, the lullaby continued to rise from his battered soul, a whisper of hope that, despite everything, he would one day find his way back to the love that had been lost. On a frigid evening when the city's pavement was slick with rain and frost, James found himself playing his familiar tune outside a small, modest soup kitchen. The biting cold did little to diminish the passion in his music, nor the quiet determination in his eyes. Wrapped in a threadbare coat and seated on a worn curb, he poured his heart into every note of the lullaby, a melody that resonated with pain and hope in equal measure. As passers-by hurried along with their own burdens, one man slowed his step. Eric, a gentle soul with kind eyes, paused to listen. There was something in the raw emotion of James's performance that struck a chord deep within him. While most saw only a ragged figure lost in despair, Eric perceived the undeniable spark of a man who had once known love and beauty. "That soul right there," Eric murmured softly, his eyes brimming with compassion. Unlike the hurried gazes of the indifferent crowd, his look was one of genuine understanding, a recognition of the humanity behind the sorrow. Moved by the depth of the music and the resilience etched into every strained note, Eric approached James with cautious kindness. Over a shared cup of lukewarm soup and gentle conversation, the two discovered an unexpected kinship. For Eric, it wasn't just the melody that captivated him, it was the unspoken story of a man who had once been whole, now wandering in search of fragments of a life that seemed forever lost. In that moment, Eric extended more than just words of comfort. He offered shelter, food, and a simple gesture of respect that would pierce through the hardened layers of despair surrounding James. That night, as Eric led him to a modest room above a quiet storefront, James experienced a taste of what it felt like to be seen as more than a shadow on the pavement. Under a leaky roof for the first time in years, he lay awake, the lullaby still humming softly in his dreams, a promise of hope that even in the darkest corners, kindness could be a beacon. In the days that followed, Eric's steady support began to melt away the frozen barriers of isolation that had defined James's existence. There were no grand declarations or forced attempts at cheer. Instead, there was a slow, genuine reconnection with the world, a world that had once seemed so distant. As they shared stories over simple meals and quiet walks along rain-soaked streets, Eric's compassion rekindled a small flame within James. It was a flame that had long been smothered by the cold anonymity of the city, but now flickered with the promise of renewal. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, James dared to dream again. The lullaby that had once been a solitary echo in the night now took on new meaning, a symbol of resilience, of a future where the past might one day be reclaimed. Though the scars of his forgotten identity remained, Eric's kindness had offered a bridge from the shadows to the promise of light. That evening, as the city settled into a quiet lull, James picked up his guitar with hands that trembled not only from the cold but from a dawning hope. In the soft glow of a single lamp, he began to play once more, this time, with the knowledge that even the smallest act of compassion could illuminate the darkest of paths. And as his fingers coaxed out the first tentative notes of the lullaby, there was a subtle shift in the melody, a quiet declaration that, despite the hardships of the past, the future was still unwritten and full of promise. In the small community shelter that had become his temporary haven, James began to find his footing again. Each day, he swept the creaking floors and tidied the shared spaces, the simple act of work slowly instilling within him a renewed sense of purpose. The shelter was a mosaic of broken souls seeking refuge, a place where every smile, every kind word, was a small victory against the tide of despair. Amid the quiet determination of its residents, James discovered that even a man stripped of his name could rebuild himself through the acts of daily life. Eric, now a constant presence in his life, believed wholeheartedly in the redemptive power of music. He would often speak of how music connected hearts, mended broken spirits, and forged unexpected bonds between strangers. When the shelter announced an upcoming fundraiser, a modest event designed to raise both funds and morale, Eric insisted that James perform. "Music connects us," he said with quiet conviction, his eyes alight with the promise of transformation. Though hesitant at first, the thought of sharing his music once more kindled a spark within James that he had long thought extinguished. Over the following weeks, as the fundraiser drew nearer, James poured every ounce of his reclaimed determination into preparing for the performance. In the quiet hours before dawn, beneath a threadbare blanket and the soft hum of memories, he practiced the lullaby that had haunted him for so long. The notes, once mere echoes of a forgotten past, now carried the weight of hope, a delicate promise that the future could mend even the deepest wounds of the present. On the day of the fundraiser, the shelter buzzed with anticipation. Residents, staff, and volunteers gathered in a repurposed community hall, their eyes reflecting the resilience of those who had struggled and survived. As James took the modest stage, the room fell into a hushed expectancy. With Eric watching from the front row, a quiet pillar of unwavering support, James began to play. His guitar's gentle strumming filled the space, and soon, the haunting strains of the lullaby unfolded like a delicate tapestry woven with threads of loss, hope, and the promise of a new beginning. Each note resonated deeply with the audience, drawing forth memories of love, sacrifice, and the bittersweet beauty of resilience. In that moment, the shelter transformed from a place of mere survival into a sanctuary where every heart present was bound by the shared language of music. The performance wasn't merely a display of talent, it was a raw, unfiltered testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise above adversity. As the final chord faded into silence, the applause was not just for the music, but for the man who had dared to reclaim a piece of himself. In that brief, transformative moment, James felt as if the fragments of his past were aligning, each note bridging the chasm between who he had been and who he might yet become. Unbeknownst to him, this performance would be the first step on a path that led him inexorably toward a destiny entwined with the love and loss of his past, a destiny that would soon call him back to the very heart of his forgotten identity. Half a world away from the quiet resilience of the shelter, preparations for a grand wedding were reaching a critical point. Amara, now grown and embodying the graceful beauty of her youth, faced a crisis on what was meant to be the most perfect day of her life. The carefully chosen band, handpicked not just for their musical talent but for their connection to the legacy of her father, had cancelled at the last minute. The absence of music was more than an inconvenience, it was a painful reminder of the father she had lost, and a void that threatened to overshadow the joy of her union with Eric. Despair threatened to engulf her as she wandered through the empty rehearsal hall. The silence was deafening, every vacant chair and darkened stage a stark contrast to the celebration she had envisioned. Yet amidst her sorrow, a determined resolve began to take shape. Eric, ever the pillar of support, vowed to find a solution. "This day isn't over until every piece of our story is in place," he declared, his voice firm with quiet determination. That evening, as twilight draped the city in soft hues of blue and purple, Eric found himself wandering the rain-slicked streets in search of a miracle. In a narrow alley lit by the flickering glow of a solitary street lamp, he was drawn to a small gathering of people around a humble figure.
Tere on avitat krate, sa James, a man wo se veri presence carice vet of a tusant unspoken stories.
The same haunting melody that had once interrupted a wedding now floated from his guitar in the crisp night air. It was raw, aching, and despite the man's ragged appearance, inexplicably familiar. Eric paused, captivated by the way each note seemed to reverberate with emotion and history.
The melody was a poignant reminder of so meeting lost, so meeting deeply personal.
As he listened, he realized that this was the man whose music had once filled a little apartment with love and hope. Without hesitation, Eric approached James. "I need you to play at a wedding," he said, his tone a blend of urgency and reverence.
"This song, your song, belongs with USTD."
James looked up, his eyes reflecting a tumult of confusion and a glimmer of recognition that he couldn't fully place. Though the hardships of the street had left their mark, there was a spark in his gaze that hinted at a connection to a past long buried. With a silent nod, he agreed to join Eric on a journey that neither fully understood, a journey that would soon bring him face to face with a destiny he had long forgotten. Back at the wedding venue, as preparations raced against time, a subtle transformation began to take hold. The loss of the planned band was swiftly replaced by the hope of something far more profound, a reunion of hearts and histories. The echoes of the street musician's melody promised to fill the void, not with mere notes, but with the very essence of a past that was about to reawaken. For Amara, this unexpected twist was a harbinger of change, a sign that even in the midst of sorrow, fate could still deliver the promise of reconciliation and joy. On the morning of the wedding, the air was electric with anticipation, a palpable blend of nervous excitement and quiet wonder. Guests gathered in the sunlit chapel, their chatter fading into a reverent hush as the ceremony was about to begin. Amara, resplendent in her gown and unaware of the dramatic events unfolding behind the scenes, waited at the altar, a vision of poised beauty and latent sorrow. Then, as if summoned by an unseen force, the first notes of a familiar melody cut through the silence. The sound, carried on a gentle breeze, was unmistakable. It was the lullaby, a song that had once been the heartbeat of a loving home. The delicate notes floated through the hall, weaving a tapestry of sound that evoked memories of laughter, love, and heartache. All eyes turned toward the source of the music, and there he stood. James, his face etched with the lines of hardship yet illuminated by a sudden, almost miraculous clarity, strummed his guitar with trembling determination. In that moment, the years that had obscured his identity fell away. The haunting strains of the lullaby, so rich with both grief and hope, transcended time. For Amara, the melody was not merely a song, it was a message, a whisper from the past that spoke directly to her soul. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the weathered musician, and a single shattering word escaped her lips: "Daddy." The chapel, once filled with soft hymns and murmurs of love, was now silenced by the raw power of this revelation. In that instant, the carefully orchestrated order of the day unraveled into a cascade of overwhelming emotions. The music, which had begun as a quiet echo of a forgotten lullaby, now served as the bridge between two disparate worlds, the world of the present and the cherished memories of the past. James's voice wavered as he continued to sing, each note punctuating the reawakening of memories that had been buried beneath years of pain and loss. The melody acted as a key, unlocking a flood of recollections that neither man nor daughter could ignore. In that sacred space, time seemed to shatter. The past and present converged, melding into a single transcendent moment where every heartbreak, every joy, every whispered promise of a lullaby was laid bare before them. As the final notes hung in the air, a stunned silence enveloped the chapel. The guests, caught in the gravity of the moment, exchanged looks of disbelief and empathy. It was as if the music had not only shattered the confines of time, but had also broken down the barriers that had kept father and daughter apart for so long. Amid tears and trembling embraces, the realization dawned that this was not a mere interruption but a long-awaited reunion, a chance to reclaim the love that had been lost and the future that had been unjustly stolen. In the midst of the stunned silence that followed the final note, time itself appeared to slow. Amara, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum heralding both sorrow and joy, dropped her bouquet as she stepped forward. With each hesitant stride, the distance between the woman she had become and the little girl who once listened to her father's lullabies seemed to vanish. As she reached the stage, her eyes brimmed with tears, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and a tender sorrow for years lost. James, still cradling the remnants of the fading melody in his soul, trembled as the sound of Amara's footsteps resonated through the space. In a moment that felt both surreal and predestined, the two collided in an embrace that defied the years of separation. Amara's voice, soft and trembling, repeated the word "Daddy" again and again, as if trying to etch the reunion into her very being. James's eyes, wide with a mixture of guilt and overwhelming love, filled with tears as he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I never knew." His voice broke under the weight of years spent wandering in a shadowed existence, unaware that the love he had lost was reaching out to him now through a simple, undeniable melody. The gathered guests, witnessing this deeply personal and transformative moment, felt an emotional current ripple through the room. Conversations halted, and even the soft rustle of fabric seemed to give way to the raw intensity of the reunion. In that embrace, the past, filled with lost promises, forgotten lullabies, and the agony of separation, melted away, replaced by a newfound hope and the possibility of healing. For Amara, the reunion was a collision of emotions. The figure before her was not the idealized memory of a loving father from childhood, but a man scarred by time and tragedy. Yet within those scars lay the unmistakable remnants of a deep, abiding love, a love that had endured even the cruel erasures of fate. With trembling hands, she clutched at him, desperate to hold on to every moment, every memory, that she believed would help mend the fractures of her heart. As tears fell freely, mingling with laughter and whispered apologies, the wedding transformed from a ceremony of planned perfection into a poignant testament to life's unpredictable turns. In that fragile, beautiful moment of reunion, every guest bore silent witness to the miracle of rediscovered love, a love that transcended pain, time, and the inexorable march of fate. For James, the reunion was both a balm and a revelation. "I didn't know who I was," he confessed through broken sobs, "but the song stayed with me. It was the only part of me that survived." His voice, laden with regret and longing, echoed in the hallowed space, binding the hearts of all who listened to the enduring power of a melody that had once been lost, and now was finally found. In the quiet aftermath of the emotional reunion, as the stunned silence slowly gave way to murmurs of joy and renewed hope, Eric stepped forward. His voice, steady and sincere, broke through the lingering shock. "James, I never understood the full story, but I knew deep in my heart that you were meant to be here today." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of an understanding that transcended the boundaries of mere chance. In that moment, it became clear that Eric's intuition and quiet persistence had reconnected two souls that had been separated by fate's cruel design. James reached out, his trembling hand finding Eric's in a gesture of mutual gratitude and shared wonder. "You gave me my daughter back," he said softly, his eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and redemption. In that simple acknowledgement lay the profound realization that sometimes, the most unexpected acts of kindness could bridge even the deepest chasms of despair. For Amara, standing between the two men who now formed the fragile circle of her renewed family, the truth became undeniable. Her journey toward healing was woven with the threads of both lost memories and newfound love. As the ceremony resumed in a gentle ebb of whispered congratulations and soft embraces, the wedding transformed into something more than a celebration of union. It became a testament to the indomitable resilience of the human spirit. Every tear shed, every word spoken in that sacred space, was a reminder that while the past might leave indelible marks, the future was an unwritten page waiting to be filled with hope, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. Guests, moved by the palpable emotion that hung in the air, offered silent prayers and hopeful smiles. In the quiet corners of the room, heartfelt conversations blossomed. Conversations about redemption, second chances, and the mysterious ways in which life's intricate tapestry was woven. In that instant, the seemingly disparate paths of three lives converged into one singular narrative of healing and reunion. Eric, ever the quiet guardian of hope, looked on as Amara embraced her father with an intensity that belied years of separation. His heart swelled with a mixture of pride and wonder. Here was a family, rebuilt against all odds, a living reminder that even the deepest wounds could be healed by the tender, persistent notes of a forgotten lullaby. In that shared moment of silent understanding, it was clear that every twist of fate, every hardship endured, had led to this one miraculous reunion, a testament to the enduring power of love and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. As the night deepened and soft, starlight filtered through the windows of the now transformed wedding venue, a new chapter began to unfold. James, no longer the nameless wanderer of the streets but a cherished figure reborn through music and love, returned to the stage for one final performance. The atmosphere was different now, charged with an air of triumph rather than despair. The earlier heartbreak had given way to a gentle celebration of reconciliation and hope. Every face in the room, from the tear-streaked eyes of a grieving daughter to the warm, knowing smile of a man who had reunited a family, reflected the transformative power of forgiveness and connection. The guitar in James's hands felt like an extension of his soul as he strummed the familiar notes of the lullaby, a melody that had witnessed the darkest hours and now heralded a rebirth. Each chord rang clear and true, reverberating with both the sorrow of lost time and the sweet promise of a future reclaimed. In the soft glow of candlelight and the tender murmur of applause, the song evolved from a mere echo of the past into a living, breathing hymn of renewal. Amara, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of joy, danced slowly beside her father. In that quiet moment, the boundaries between past and present blurred until they became one. The wedding, once on the brink of collapse, now pulsed with a vibrant energy, a celebration not only of love between two people but of the miraculous power of family reunited. Every note of the lullaby, every whispered word between father and daughter, became a vow that the scars of yesterday would be healed by the promise of tomorrow. Eric watched the scene with a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that his small act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the lives of those present. In his heart, he recognized that this night was a testament to the idea that sometimes, life's most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we need to be. And so, as James's final chord resonated into silence, Amara leaned close and whispered, "Sing it again, Daddy." With a gentle kiss upon her forehead and a smile that held the warmth of 1,000 memories, he replied, "Every night, sweetheart, just as I promised." In that transcendent moment, the past sorrows and the future's hopes merged into a single luminous present. The lullaby had been reborn, not as a relic of lost time, but as a living beacon guiding them all toward healing, redemption, and the unyielding light of love. As the family, newly bound by fate and forgiveness, embraced beneath the soft glow of the midnight sky, it was clear that though the journey had been long and fraught with pain, the future was now a canvas of endless possibility, a future where every night would be graced by a lullaby that promised, with every tender note, that love could indeed conquer all. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for more exciting stories, and see you in the next video.